This is Entertainment for Review, and today I'm going to be taking a look at another episode of The Big Bang Theory, and that is Season 3, Episode 16, The Excelsior Acquisition. Now, the episode gets this title because in this episode, they get a chance to go to an autograph signing with Stan Lee. Excelsior is Stan Lee's signature catchphrase, which is why it's put in the title. I do very much like the entrance to this episode. It starts with the group in the comic book store, and Raj comes in, and he's wearing a very unique shirt with a speaker in the middle of it that he can play various music and sounds from. I'm not sure if this is a real shirt, I never really looked into it, but when I saw this episode for the first time, I did wish that I had one. And it is in this scene that Leonard talks to Stuart, who reveals that his uncle is a dermatologist who did some work on Stan Lee, and as a favor to him, he's going to do a signing at Stuart's comic book store. Next, we see the guys back at the apartment, and they're trying to figure out which comic book they're going to have Stan Lee sign. Now, I have had comic books signed by Stan Lee, and let me tell you, the last time I did it, the cost was around $135 a comic, so it can be a hard decision to choose the right one. Sheldon has an odd idea to have him sign a Batman comic. And of course, Stan Lee has nothing to do with Batman, that's what will make this so unique. No one would have him sign a Batman comic. Howard gets a paper cut looking through his comics, and Sheldon tells him he can go to his desk drawer and get a bandage and some Neosporin. While he's in there, he notices that Sheldon has a lot of unopened paychecks, and he finds a court summons for Sheldon to come in for a traffic violation. This is an odd thing, because as we know, Sheldon doesn't really drive. But we did see Sheldon drive in one episode, and that's where this ticket came from. Back in Season 3, Episode 8, The Adhesive Ducky Deficiency, Sheldon came to Penny's aid and drove her to the hospital. Fact of which he reminds her here, but she tries to deny.
November 16th? Penny? That's the evening you fell in your bathtub and I had to drive you to the emergency room. No, it isn't.
But is of course unsuccessful because Sheldon does have an eidetic memory. And not to mention that Penny was in the picture with Sheldon in the car. Sheldon is curious why a picture taken of Penny's car registered to her came to him, and she says she had to tell them who was driving because she couldn't afford any more points on her license and she already can't get good car insurance. So Sheldon says he plans to fight this and he's going to prepare his defense. And Raj points out that Sheldon's court date is on the day of the Stan Lee signing. And Sheldon assumes that his friends are going to not go to the signing with him and go to court to support him. And of course they are not. They are going to go get their comic book signed by Stan Lee. So it looks like it's just going to be Sheldon and Penny going to court, as Penny really doesn't have any valid excuse and she needs to be there as Sheldon's witness. The day comes for Sheldon's court appearance and he goes to meet Penny ahead of time. He decides to have her rehearse a witness statement he made for her ahead of time, which he has written in her vernacular, or what he assumes is her vernacular. So as always, Sheldon is being insulting without intending to be insulting, it's just the way he is. Sheldon learns in this episode that sometimes that does not benefit him. When he's in court and it's his turn, he gets up and makes a long opening statement, at the end of which the judge says guilty and pay the clerk. Sheldon doesn't think he's getting his fair treatment, which he might not be. He does something you just don't do, and he goes to insult the judge, saying that he's at the top of his profession while the judge is at the kiddie table of his. The judge tells him that he'll give him a chance to apologize, or he's going to find him in contempt of court and throw him in jail. And of course, being Sheldon and never thinks that he's wrong, does not apologize, and is thrown in jail.
I'm going to give you a chance to apologize for that last remark.
I'm a scientist. I never apologize for the truth.
The comic book store, the guys are in line waiting for Stan Lee's autograph when Penny calls Leonard to tell him that Sheldon is in jail, which apparently Howard predicted, and it was pretty likely given Sheldon being Sheldon. Raj mentions when he goes inside he's going to ask Stan Lee why so many of his characters have first and last names that start with the same letter. He gives several examples, my favorite of which is J. Jonah Jameson Jr., who's advised him not to make Stan Lee mad, and Howard even cuts in front of Raj so that he'll get to his autograph first. Sheldon's time in the jail doesn't last too long, as when he realizes that he's going to have to use the bathroom in the jail cell, he says he's ready to apologize to the judge. Back at the apartment, Leonard, Howard, and Raj are reviewing their autographs. Both Leonard and Howard got nice autographs from Stan Lee, saying "from my friend" and having his signature Excelsior line. Rogers, however, just says "to Raj from Stan Lee." And that's because he asked the question he shouldn't have asked about the names. And then he proceeds to list many more. Raj isn't wrong. This is a little bit of a weird thing that happens in comic books, and a lot with Stan Lee characters. But you don't want to anger the man you're asking for an autograph from. And Sheldon returns. He tells them what happened. He got thrown in jail. He also got fined. He got 3 points on a license that he doesn't have yet. And he had to issue an apology that he felt was undue. That part's a little questionable. And Howard chooses to rub it in by reminding him that he didn't get an autograph from Stan Lee. He says that after the signing, they all went with Stuart and Stan Lee to get gelato. This of course pushes Sheldon over the edge, and he's extra mad at Penny for essentially costing him this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Penny decides she has to try to do something to try to make this up to Sheldon, so she goes to Stuart's comic book store and asks if he has Stan Lee's phone number. He says he doesn't, but he has his address, but he can't give it to her. And ultimately, they strike a deal in which she'll go with Stuart to his cousin's wedding if he gives her the address. But she's allowed to bring Leonard with her, even though Stuart says they'll say he's her cousin. It is worth noting that we are seeing a big change in Stuart. He's becoming a more sad character that we'll become much more familiar with. That long ago, that he had gone on a few dates with Penny. He seemed like a much more confident person, but that is gone. This scene, he talks about the fact that his plans for the night are to share a can of tuna with a stray cat who might stand him up. The next stage of Penny's plan to make it up to Sheldon is she takes him uninvited to Stan Lee's house. He rings the bell and Stan Lee comes to the door, and Penny tries to explain the situation, and Stan Lee is obviously annoyed, which Sheldon is not picking up on. He sarcastically invites them in to come watch the basketball game, and Sheldon accepts the invitation. Penny says that he doesn't understand sarcasm, and Stanley says he's going to call the police.
I mean, why don't you just come on in and watch the Lakers game with me?
Well, I'm not much of a sports fan, but thank you.
Back at the apartment, Leonard, Howard, and Roger having dinner, and Raj is listing yet another list of Stan Lee characters that have the same letters in their first and last names. Sheldon comes in and says he got to hang out with Stan Lee, see the inside of his house, and he didn't get an autograph on a comic book, but he got his autograph on a restraining order application. And he says he'll get to hang out with Stan Lee again at the hearing, and he says that this will look great hanging up next to his restraining order from Leonard Nimoy. And this is where we end the episode. For me, this is a very solid and funny episode. I like that we get a guest appearance by Stan Lee, my favorite comic book writer. An autograph from Stan Lee is something any comic book collector would want. And I like all the antics with Sheldon. We follow up on the storyline that happened back earlier in the season. Unfortunately, we see Sheldon's act of kindness result in him getting in trouble. Sheldon and Penny's parts in this episode are great, but my favorite part of this episode is Raj. He's the breakthrough character in this episode. Even though the focus isn't totally on him, this is one of the episodes where I feel he shines. I love the shirt he's wearing in the beginning with the speaker. All the sound effects were pretty hilarious. And I love that even though it cost him a nice autograph and he wasn't able to call Stan Lee Stan, he stuck to his guns and asked Stan Lee a very important question. Why not? You get so few opportunities to meet these people, you might as well ask the questions that are on your mind. I like the lists of all the heroes he's giving to prove his point. Me, Raj is the funniest part of this episode. In my mind, Penny still owes Sheldon a pretty big favor. She did say she would pay him back for the fine as long as he didn't ever cash the check. Luckily, their friendship can survive this. I scored this episode at a 9 out of 10. Let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comments section. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and keep an eye out for my next video coming soon.